So hello and welcome to today's episode of Rockstar Retrospectives. Today we'll be taking a look at one of the best games that Rockstar never actually made, which is LA Noire. Now LA Noire is a bit of a strange game in the Rockstar family, because it was made by Sydney-based studio Team Bondi, and Rockstar themselves initially had absolutely nothing to do with it. Instead it was going to be Sony who were going to publish the game as a PS3 exclusive, but for unknown reasons the publishing rights were handed over to Rockstar Games in September 2006. Which of course is 5 entire years before LA Noire even saw store shelves. But once Rockstar Games took over publishing, they did help out Team Bondi a lot with their development. It's not known how much Rockstar actually assisted on this development, given they themselves were busy with a plethora of different projects. These of course being Grand Theft Auto 4, episodes in Liberty City, Red Dead Redemption, Midnight Club, Buddy Scholarship Edition, etc, etc, and the fact Rockstar also had absolutely no studios based in Australia. LA Noire was also an incredibly expensive game to create, at least for its time, estimated to have cost well over $50 million to make, which adjusted for 2020 standards I believe is around $60 million. It's absolute insanity when you realise that LA Noire was Team Bondi's first and only game they ever made. The budget was about the same for that as Call of Duty Black Ops, and shortly after LA Noire's release, Team Bondi went bankrupt and Rockstar Games acquired the rights to LA Noire. So despite not being made by Rockstar, a bit like Max Payne, it is now considered a full Rockstar title because, Rockstar do own the full rights to everything now. Anyway, enough of the brief history, let's get on to the review. And first of all, let's cover the theme, which of course is film noir. And I think it's safe to say that LA Noire does manage to stand out incredibly well. It's one of the very few games that I think ties in very heavily to the film noir style of presentation. I cannot think of many other games that even attempted to convert that genre into gaming. Pretty much everything you would expect from the genre was replicated about as perfectly as you could get it. From the 1940s ambiguous jazz soundtrack, the incredibly drab colour schemes, the investigator, protagonist, the femme fatale, the fact it takes place in Los Angeles and revolves around corrupt police, etc. If you're a fan of the genre, you'll probably be able to point out a lot more tropes than I ever could. I think it's safe to say the team definitely did their research on the genre, or were massive fans of it. Probably both, because I haven't seen such strong attention to detail of the source material since I reviewed the Warriors game adaptation a while back. If you're a fan of the genre yourself, I think you will be pleasantly surprised, and can appreciate the vibe and effort that's been put into it a hell of a lot more. I also wouldn't be surprised if the missions were very heavily influenced by many classic films, and I say this because it wouldn't be the first time given that many other games, especially those that Rockstar have had a helping hand in, that take inspiration or pay tribute to them. As you can probably tell, I myself am not really that much of a massive fan of the genre, but I actually had to do a project on this when I was in college and I did use LA Noire as a source. I mean, I did also have to watch some films, but it gave me a reason to play LA Noire for the first time ever back in 2017. Anyway, LA Noire does feel like it's more of an interactive crime drama than a traditional sandbox game like you would expect if you're a fan of GTA or Red Dead Redemption, with much less emphasis on extremely massive action-packed sequences and a sprawling world to explore, but way more emphasis on a narrative-driven experience. Don't get me wrong, there are a few moments like that in the game which are quite action-packed and will have you get involved in shootouts, but they're nowhere near as frequent as they are in Rockstar's other big franchises. It is a much slower paced game. If that sounds negative, I don't mean it to because it isn't, and helps give LA Noire its own identity. In fact, one major difference between, say, Grand Theft Auto and LA Noire is the missions alone. For example, one mission in GTA is about, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, while LA Noire, the cases are about 30 minutes to an hour long each, which really do make it feel like it's an episode of an interactive crime drama you'd be watching on TV. And the various desks that you'll go through during the story do kind of feel like their own individual series in a way. Homicide's probably the best one for that because you have each sort of case dedicated to solving a specific murder, and then an overarching story revolving around the serial killer himself. I really do think the cases do have a very episode-esque kind of setup to them, and you don't really get that with many other games either. The cases are a lot different than your traditional Rockstar open world ones, because you have to actually be paying attention to the story and the surrounding areas. Because of course you need to be scanning crime scenes for clues, and use those clues to interrogate suspects and help build the bigger picture. LA Noire is not a game you can just turn your brain off and play, because it does require some level of you being heavily involved into the ongoing crime case. Like when you find a clue, Phelps notes it in his notebook, which can then be used to point out if somebody's lying or not. If you're not paying attention, you'll likely miss the clue, or interrogate the suspect wrong and end up failing the case. It's a very clever and unique approach to keep you invested into what's going on. Speaking of that actually, let's talk about one of LA Noire's most defining characteristics, the facial animations. because the facial animations were extremely advanced for its time. The best thing about them is they're not just there to look pretty, but they do play a very pivotal role in the gameplay, as they are used in the interrogations, which I feel it was an expensive risk that paid off incredibly well, because if the animations were poor, I feel it really would have harmed the game a hell of a lot. Like, imagine if you had to do the interrogations, but with the first Life is Strange or Mass Effect Andromeda type face animations. It would make the interrogations much harder to pull off if they were too stiff or extremely expressive. It was an investment that paid off heavily, and I'm surprised no other games try to utilise the same kind of technology, especially games that try to go for a more interactive drama kind of setup. One of the things that LA Noire does that manages to make it stand out, at least for its time, is it really does not shy away from some incredibly sensitive and dark topics. For example, there's an entire plot revolving around a serial killer who specifically targets women. He kills them in a very gruesome way, sometimes mutilated, and leaves them naked in a public place, which even by today's standards would be an incredibly shocking crime to come across. Apparently these cases are very heavily inspired by the Black Dahlia, which saw 22-year-old actress Elizabeth Short's body found mutilated quite horribly, having a torso separated from the waist, may have completely slashed, intestines taken out, and yeah, you get the point. It's a very horrible and undignified way to die. Anyway, that's not the only case that LA Noire took inspirations from, because one of the cases even dealt with pedophilia in Hollywood, which is still shockingly relevant in Hollywood today. And of course there's a secret sub-story that revolves around Cole Phelps' war crimes in Japan during World War II. It doesn't shy away from these topics, and I feel it deserves some appreciation for that. I realise I haven't spoken much about the gameplay, and that's because LA Noire is one of those games that gameplay isn't the strongest selling point. More so, the story-based narrative takes centre stage rather than unique and innovative gameplay. The gameplay is very slow for the most part, because you will be doing a lot of walking and scaring. There are moments where you do get involved in shootouts, which are also absolutely nothing like Rockstar's other games, because you technically don't have a health bar, and Phelps does die extremely quickly if you're prattling about in a gunfight. Likewise, I noticed weapon variety is also very limited, and you do seem to have infinite ammo on your pistol at least. It's very clear combat was not the main focus at all, but to be honest, it does feel the exact same as it does in Mafia 2. Actually, now that I think of it, the controls of both games do feel extremely similar, which I found odd since Mafia 2 is from 2K and they had nothing to do with LA Noire. But yeah, if you've played Mafia 2, LA Noire's controls will feel very similar in that department. Now the soundtrack as well, while not my usual taste, does an absolutely stellar job at not sounding like a gaming soundtrack. Like, I think the soundtrack could very easily been passed for a film soundtrack more, which to me is actually great, and I say this because when I hear the LA Noire theme, I can actually envision an actual film scene, you know. Like it's a rainy night in the 1940s and the camera pans to show a depressed detective drinking whiskey at a bar. It's all I can envision, but you get the point, it's very well orchestrated. To be honest, there isn't really much I actively dislike about LA Noire, but one thing I did always find poor about it was LA Noire's so-called open world, because I did find it to be extremely lackluster, somehow having less to do in it than Grand Theft Auto 3 did, because there is genuinely nothing to really do in there except the occasional street crime case, which gives you a bit of a mini mission. But other than that, I just find it to be really lacking. Now understandably, you don't even get wanted levels when you go around killing people, so while running them over is funny, it does get a bit worn out really quickly. So if you go into LA Noire expecting a GTA-esque type open world experience with plenty to do and a massive map to explore, you will be let down in this department. It really does feel like LA Noire was never intended to be fully open world. Same goes for the NPCs because they are very, very basic. However, given LA Noire's very film-based approach and the lack of free mode-based content, there isn't really much to keep you coming back for more once you finish the main game, which I guess is a very double-edged sword. The main story alone will take you about 18 to 22 hours to do, so I guess if you've enjoyed the story, you get your money's worth for sure. But ultimately, what you see in the story is all the game has to offer, and because of that, I feel LA Noire is one of those games you'll enjoy your time with, and then you'll probably put it away and not touch it for a few years. But all in all, LA Noire is a fantastic game I find, and very sorely underappreciated compared to Rockstar's other titles. And if you really love strong story-based experiences, you really can't go wrong with this one. But yeah, that's it for today's episode. Thank you for watching and have a great day.